We have lots to discuss in today's video, including some major rumblings around the NHL trade front ahead of the deadline. There is talk that Mikko Rantanen could possibly find himself on the move again. If he does, he's a good chance he's heading west, maybe with the LA Kings, maybe the Anaheim Ducks. Plus, we have the latest rumblings around the Edmonton Oilers, New York Rangers, and the Buffalo Sabres. Some injury updates as well, which also are kind of linked to some rumors around trades, including Boston and Florida, some key injuries on those teams, plus key milestones as well for Austin Matthews and Sidney Crosby. A lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. We're getting closer and closer now to Friday's NHL trade deadline. Less than a week away. We've had some big deals go down yesterday with 3 trades and lots of rumblings that we could see. There's possibility of another 1 or 2 more today, but lots of talk around the NHL for sure. A couple of key injuries, though, that are going to have an impact not only on teams' performance and what they're doing, but around the trade front as well. One around Boston and Boston captain Bruins Marchand, who got hurt yesterday in the game against the Penguins. I know some were saying the hit or whatever you want to call it into the corner with, against Joseph. To me, it didn't really look all that egregious. In my opinion, I think Joseph's kind of letting up almost a little bit, but just an unfortunate kind of contact there. Marchand goes in awkwardly and certainly looked dazed going off. So, he's not necessarily considered out long term, but there's a lot of speculation about the future of Marchand, who obviously needs a new contract pending UFA. The Bruins appear to be in a mode where they're likely going to sell, but I wouldn't be shocked if they're more of a hybrid type of situation where they may add, but if they add, it's going to be pieces they think are going to help long term into next year and beyond. But certainly a few players to watch there. Marchand being one of them. We don't know. We've heard lots of talk from the captain himself saying he wants to stay. Hoping to get a contract worked out, but of course he understands and knows that if the team doesn't have a deal, that they very well might do this. There's lots of attention around him for sure. So hard to say how it plays out. I don't think if any team wanted to acquire him, I don't think this injury is going to be anything major to deter them from doing that. But it be something to monitor for sure. Could impact the Bruins' performance and could impact potential how things are handled. So we'll see how that goes. In Florida, of course, we saw the big trade last night acquiring Seth Jones. And now we found out as well that Matthew Tkachuk is on long-term injured reserve. Of course, we knew coming out of the Four Nation tournament that his injury had a potential to be serious. There was word that he was being sought by multiple doctors to get a different opinion. And there were some, I think it was Renaud Lavoie was the first, that said that there were certainly concerns that his season could be over. Now, that wasn't clarified if it was going to be a case of season in total or just regular season. Comments from Paul Maurice indicated that Tkachuk would play again this year, knowing that the team's going to playoffs, but we don't really know a lot about his situation. They haven't really said a whole lot about it, but he's on long-term injury reserve. Lots of speculation, of course, that he's going to stay that way, which you've already got a big deal gone down for the Panthers with Jones, and now they still have lots of space if he is on LTIR for the rest of the year. So lots more talk around Florida, what else they might do. Certainly going to load up for another opportunity to defend their championship and see if they can win back-to-back Stanley Cups. So Florida is definitely going to be a team to watch here. Are they less dangerous without Tkachuk? Sure, but at the same time, they're not too worried about their regular season at this point, and if he can return during the playoffs and they can load up in between, then they're going to do so. So definitely a team to watch for sure. Minnesota Wild defenseman Jonas Brodin's injured yet again. Now he's considered week to week. Of course, they just lost Travis Sturman on waivers as well. The Wild have had a lot of injuries on the blue line throughout the year. Finally, they're starting to get healthy, and now it's got an injury again, which is a key part of their blue line there. So it's not good news on that front. Couple key milestones today. The Leafs and Penguins had a bit of a crazy game with a 6-5 finish. Maple Leafs captain Austin Matthews became the fastest Maple Leaf ever in history to hit 700 career points, which he's done so in 607 career games. Also, scoring goal number 390 of his career, moves past Daryl Sittler for number 2 all time on the Maple Leafs list, only sitting behind former Leaf captain Mats Sundin. Sidney Crosby, captain of the Penguins, of course, has said in that crazy game against the Leafs today, also passed Bobby Hull for 18th highest on the all-time goal-scoring list. So Sid continues to climb the ranks of the all-time greats. Like I said, that game ended with a 6-5 win. Neither goalie was exceptionally good. I do wonder about the future. There's lots of chatter around Erik Karlsson as well, and whether or not he is going to be finishing with the Penguins or moving along. He's been asked about the situation, and it's clarified that he has not been asked to waive his no move or no trade clause at this point in time. I don't suspect Dubas and the Penguins would ask him to do that until they have a deal they're ready to accept. But he talked pretty openly about it, that if he's asked, that of course he'll look at it in consideration with what what works for him. Is not guarantee he's going to accept it just anywheres, but there's certainly teams out there that are looking and are interested. The big problem with Karlsson the last number of years has been the contract, but as his time winding down with the Penguins, another player certainly to watch, but another very complicated deal ahead of the deadline as well. That could be a summertime deal, hard to say. Lots of other moves around the NHL that we're monitoring right now. One that we could see sometime today or sometime in the next, well ahead of the deadline, would be the Rangers. They continue to be persistent with retooling this roster and making sure any pending unrestricted free agents that they're likely not bringing back are dealt to bring in something. Of course, we already saw some deals involving the Rangers throughout the course of the season, including, kicking things off with Captain Jacob Trouba going to the Ducks. We just saw a 4-player deal as well with the Avalanche as well, with them moving out Ryan Lindgren and Jimmy Vesey. And now it looks like the next one on the list to be moved out is Riley Smith. Riley Smith is, again, in that same kind of contract scenario, expiring contract, and it's been reported today that the Rangers are holding him out of the lineup for trade-related reasons. So they usually only do that if, one, they're confident a deal is going to be reached and if things are reasonably close. Like I said, we saw and heard that yesterday, and within a short period of time, we had a trade for Nyquist. So could be the case here today. It could be any time, really. Hard to say, but sometimes these things appear to be close, and then suddenly they hit a snag or something, and, takes them a little longer than they were expecting to get it done. But Riley Smith will most likely be dealt, just a matter of where and when, and exactly all the details that we don't know here just yet. Buffalo still very actively trying to do some things. Still lots of talk if they'll do something bigger because they have many players on their team generating interest. We've heard for the last number of weeks around Cousins and Byram being the main guys, a little bit about Jack Quinn, but that's kind of peeled off here lately. We've heard about other guys more recently, like Matthias Samuelson's name apparently has been out there as well. I think, really, like I said, I think that the general manager there, Kevin Adams, has been taking calls on most players. There's not too many he wouldn't consider doing something with. They have to factor in all things. But one name that they're actually actively trying to move, not just listening on, is defenseman Henry Yokoharu, who had a pretty decent showing, in my opinion, at the Four Nation tournament. I think he would like an opportunity somewhere else, and they are working on that. They're getting tons of calls on Alex Tuch as well. Again, Tuch is a player that's pretty close to being untouchable, and I don't think it's something they're actively looking to move. Like I said, when I acquired him in the Eichel trade from Vegas, he was a player who's from that area. Going to the Buffalo Sabres was a homecoming, and he was one of the players that were very happy to be there. I'm sure he's not thrilled with the results the team has had since his time there, but I don't see him necessarily somebody who wants out of there, and they need players who want to be there. So I think they'll listen. They have to, the position they're in, but at the same time, I don't know. It's going to take a big price tag, I think, to get them to move. But like I said, all these other names, they're out there. I don't even think Owen Power's an untouchable, but again, it would take a significant move to make it happen. A lot of Buffalo's retooling, I think, will happen more in the summer, but we're bound to see a few things here ahead of the deadline. The Edmonton Oilers are another team to watch as well. Stan Bowman's got his work it out for them, because the Oilers have certainly had a skid since the Four Nation break. Connor McDavid had the golden goal to help Canada win the tournament. Things haven't gone so well for McDavid and the Oilers since they resumed NHL regular season play. But a name to watch here is Evander Kane. Kane's been out all season, and they're trying to gain clarity on his injury situation. Because at this point, I think if he's going to be out for the remainder of the regular season, then they're not going to likely move him. They'll probably make... I would suspect they would make use of his contract flexibility with the LTIR to make sure that they can do what they can to make the roster as best as possible. But there's been talk all season that Kane thinks he can be back before the end of the regular season, and I think he's going to push them to play, and he doesn't care what's best for the team. He wants to get out there and get in the lineup after being out all year. So whether or not that means, what they can do or not at the deadline, I don't think it's going to matter too much to him, and probably it shouldn't, but his $5.125 million would make a big difference in whether or not they have that available or not. So now the big thing with Kane is that they are exploring moving him. He did have a full no move for a while. That's not the case anymore. The way the contract was structured, that changed at the end of February, and now it's a modified no trade clause where he can block 16 teams. So that means that there's still 15 other teams besides the Oilers that are not on that list, giving the Oilers lots of options on who they can talk to without his consent to consider a trade. Edmonton Media is reporting that they are talking to many of those teams to see if there is a fit and interest to find a deal they can get out of LTIR, gain some additional roster and cap flexibility ahead of the deadline. I think looking back in retrospect, a lot of their moves that they made in the summer, whether it be Victor Arvidsson or Jeff Skinner, have not worked out. I mean, they unfortunately lost because of really their own fault, really. Holloway and Broberg, and look, they've excelled in St. Louis. Like, those deals have worked out really nicely for the Blues. And if you look at what the Oilers are missing, they're probably looking for the next Dylan Holloway at this point. He's really grown his game and elevated things, and I think considering what the Blues are paying him, I think that they've got to be regretting that. They miss his not only his youth, but his speed, the fact that has grown his offensive game. Arvidsson, good player. I think his body's taken a beating over the years. I just don't know that he's got much left in the tank. Same with Jeff Skinner. Hasn't been a good fit there. On paper, this team looked great. And I'm not saying they can't get back to where they were last year, but it's not going to be easy. I think it's fair to say the Oilers don't have the depth that they did before. So at least I don't think they do. Anyway, so we'll see what happens. But the Kane contract's going to complicate things, and they are looking into moving him. At the same time, you could argue that a player like him who has some offensive upside and size, strength, grit, maybe would be a welcome addition. But I think it's been one of those situations where they haven't always loved having him there either, so it's been up and down. So we'll see. But Kane could be on the move. And Mikko Rantanen, the other big fish here at the deadline, could he be on the move again is a big question. A lot of NHL insiders aren't convinced that the Canes are going to do it, that even if he won't commit by the deadline to a new contract, that the odds are that he's probably going to be on the Hurricanes roster, and they'll take their chances. But they don't want to get burned here. They took their chances with Jake Gensel last year. They thought he would be a big piece to put him over the top. They didn't get where they wanted to go, and then they got burned and lost him in free agency. And they can't let that happen again, especially after giving up the assets they did this time, like Marty Necas, who's excelling with the Avalanche. So, with all that said, Mikko Rantanen, a player who is, by NHL insiders, saying unlikely to commit to an 8-year contract by Friday, could be flipped. And, of course, wherever team he's at by the trade deadline is the only team that can offer him 8 years in free agency as well. So if the Hurricanes hold him, they'll be having an advantage that way when it comes to the offseason signings. But, no guarantees. A team that's emerged by multiple reports out there right now that might be a team to watch is the LA Kings, surprisingly. I know Elliot Friedman on his latest 32 Thoughts podcast the other day had mentioned the Anaheim Ducks. Now, I don't think he had any intel to suggest the Ducks were actively pursuing, but it was just one of those things of kind of putting the pieces together, which makes sense. If you look at what the Ducks tried to do in free agency last year, they were after Stamkos, Jonathan Marchand. They went big game hunting after all the top names that were available. They didn't really get too far, but they were in there and they were trying, which shows that they want to add some big-time players if they can, and they have more flexibility than a lot of teams with the cap. So, yeah, they could offer some big money, and there's some lots of talented young players there that veterans might be excited to play with. So, LA, though, on the other hand, different situation, more of a playoff team, a little bit more established, more closer to being contenders here. There was some chatter back this past week about Quentin Byfield's name being out there, and many people, myself included, thought that was a little bit crazy talk. But would they offer up something like that? I don't know. I mean, Rantanen's a whole other beast here. Jordan Spence's name has been out there as well, but of course it's going to take a lot more than Spence to pry Rantanen away from Carolina or any other big team for that matter. So we'll see what happens, but I just, as soon as I heard LA and Rantanen, I just remember, like, well, we heard about Byfield and it sounded nuts, but if you're bringing in a Rantanen, you might have to offer up something of high value, and that just might be what it is. Would Carolina do that? Would LA do that? I don't know. Let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.